The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
My weakness has changed me to be more the person that I have always aspired to be. And it's required suffering and weakness and having to say no to things.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Charlie Peacock is a legendary musician, producer, and songwriter. His impact on the music industry spans decades. A Grammy-winning producer and a visionary artist, he's worked with some of the most influential names in music. But even more importantly, Charlie is known for his generosity and hospitality, pouring into the lives and work of artists through the art house and other creative endeavors. His passion for nurturing talent and fostering deep artistic and spiritual conversations has shaped countless musicians and writers. In his new memoir, Roots and Rhythm, Charlie shares his own journey, offering a rich reflection on music, faith, and the creative life. I was very happy to be able to sit down with Charlie Peacock to talk about success, identity, embracing failure and suffering, and navigating more than one economy at a time. Charlie Peacock, I am so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, and I'm also excited about your new memoir, Roots and Rhythm, A Life in Music.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Indeed.
You say that this book is a journey to hold on to place and people with reverence. And then you say, because before I made any music, these people and places made me.
That's right.
What's the role of place in this story and your story? That's kind of a big question. That may be big.
As somebody who is both a master of literature and a teacher, you'll get a kick out of this. But I've been working on this book. I had been working on it for, well over a decade. And there was a point where I had written a version of it and started talking to some agents about it, and I used to lead with, well, it's really a book about epistemology. And it'd be like, wah, wah.
Yeah, right.
And yet what you just described and recited back to me is basically it. I just had to learn, not to use those words in the presence of certain people. Right.
Yeah.
But I definitely wanted to know how it is that I came to know what I know. Uh-huh. And in that investigation, I, was led immediately to the power and influence of people in place. and then, wanted to do the investigative work to see what kind of ethos was there
Uh-huh.
in my great grandparents' lives, and even in the farm community that I grew up in, of which, of course, I didn't want to be a part of. I mean, I
Yeah.
was in a sense forced to be a part of it. I mean,
Uh-huh.
everybody in our family worked in fruit and nuts at one
Yeah.
time or another.
And you didn't ask to be born.
No, I didn't ask to be born, and so, but going back later as an adult, and I mean, Andy and I, we ended up getting a home in our hometown. So
Mm-hmm.
we would travel back and forth between Nashville and our hometown in Yuba City, California, which is about 45 miles north of Sacramento.
So that's a house that you bought later. It's not a family house.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Okay.
But we bought it in a neighborhood surrounded by our family. So our California family, so that we would all be close together, and so there was a lot of reasons to do it in terms of family. We had come to Nashville. We had, really began and established the work that we came to do here, and so we had the freedom, the ability to go back home and reconnect with our people. But for me, I mean, I can remember the minute the living room chairs were delivered to this house that we had bought. I mean, the first thing I did was sit down with my laptop and start writing this memoir.
Wow.
Because I knew that it's like my imagination was just on fire, and the investigator part of my brain was on fire to and really ready to receive what it is that I would find there in terms of the power and influence of people and place, and especially history as well. And as I say in the book, when you're young, you don't pay that much attention to history until you get some of your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of your moving from California to Nashville, I was fascinated with a part of your story where you said at the age of 20 you wrote your parents a note, and you said that you weren't going to work for their approval.
That's right. Yeah.
And you actually can quote from that note because you found it among your mother's effects when she died.
Yes.
Decades later.
Yeah, it was the circumstance was I was probably 20 years old at the time, and Andy and I were staying in my parents' condo while they were away, and I think it was just kind of classic thing where maybe my dad had asked me to take care of something while he was gone, and I kind of flaked out on it, and we always had this tension, about responsibility and about his version of manhood. I mean, one, he was right about the responsibility thing, but his version of manhood didn't allow for much failure, and I know why now. But it was difficult, and I just wanted them to know, after he had criticized me, one of 1,000 times on this particular subject, I just wanted him to know that, like, look, I'm just done with this. I mean, I can't live in this space where I have to constantly prove myself to you. And the irony of it is that, first of all, as you pointed out, my mother kept this note. And so I found it, after she, was over 80 years old and passed away. And then the ultimate irony is as though that even though I was able to articulate that at 20, which still kind of amazes me.
I was amazed. You said, don't push me to show you I'm somebody. I already am. Simply by conception.
Yeah, and I was not a committed Christian at all, and yet I invoked God's name in the quote as well, I believe.
Oh yeah, Yeah, you said, I'm just going to read it back to you. As much as I want to show
Yeah.
you both that I can succeed in the system, playing my music, caring for my family, this is self-centered greed and not the path of God.
Yeah.
And I, where did that come from?
I don't know. I think we need to cue the theologian now. Come in and we can talk about prevenient grace and
Yeah,
common grace and
yeah, right. Well,
but
but maybe this is what you were just about to get to. Your your life after that, though, really was a matter. I mean, you said to your parents, "Don't push me,"
yeah,
and then you were pushing yourself.
I pushed myself and I yeah, I spent and I think that's why I opened the book the way I do too, is just to show that you're on the top of the mountain, and when you've placed a person like I did my father in that position where I have to prove myself to you. I mean, they're dead and gone for 20 years, right? Like they're buried in the Sutter Cemetery, right?
Yeah,
I mean, they've moved on. This is not
yeah,
a care of theirs anymore. And yet it can define your life to that degree that even though they're not even present,
yeah,
they're always, those voices and those scripts are present with you. And it takes a lifetime to acknowledge them, discover them, and repent and repair. And, here I am at 68 years old, and I'm still talking about things that had dramatic effect on me when I was 20 years old,
yeah,
and in many ways defined the kind of life I had in terms of, I knew even then the righteous way, right?
yeah,
Or the right economy. And yet, I went on to spend 40 years living um, as if I still had something to prove,
yeah,
And I also think that I wouldn't put all of that on my father. I would, or on myself. I would say that this is also one of the things that I tackle in the book in terms of the music business. I mean, you are just, it is a thankless task. You are never done proving yourself.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
you are only as good as your last greatest story.
yeah. What you say? I think you were paraphrasing Bruce Cockburn. Having proven my identity so often that the magnetic strip of my ID is worn out.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
You know, I thought about, you probably saw Bruce Springsteen's Netflix special of his Broadway show.
Oh,
He
I loved
said,
it. It's
"Isn't it great?"
fantastic.
Yeah, and he said something like, "Every rock and roll song says, 'Daddy, love me.'"
Oh man, I cried. I
I
cried
know.
during that. Yeah, that really hit me.
Yeah.
That really hit
You know,
me.
another thing I thought about as I was reading that part of the story is somebody somewhere I heard say recently, disappointing your parents isn't the same thing as disobeying God.
Mm,
And I have found that helpful in talking with, 20 somethings in my small group or whatever.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
And I need to make sure my kids know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
Um,
I wish our family had had that nuanced or sophisticated enough version of Christianity. Um, and vocation, but we just didn't.
your
No.
family of origin or your family that you
Yeah,
raised?
family of origin. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It was something that Andy and I had to discover
Hmm.
or on our own.
Why do you think your mom kept that note?
I think probably part of it was that it was a way of her saying, "This is my son.
Mm.
This is something, unique to my understanding of who my son is. And I want to hold this close."
Yeah.
And then also, I think it was that she wanted me to see it again later, because prior to this, she would go on to tell me, after my dad had passed away and he'd been gone for probably 20 years, and she wrote me a note one time, and it just kind of a matter of fact said, um, you know, your dad never had anyone in his life who supported his music at all. And so he just had to, make it up on his own. And it was really ironic because I thought, well, that's the way I felt.
Yeah.
Even though I had him as my teacher, I felt like we were always missing each other. And I actually talk about that more in the book that Andy and I released last year.
Yeah.
Why everything that doesn't matter matters so much. But yeah, I think that that there was also probably just something that she couldn't put a name on.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think, as in the same way that you keyed in on it, I would think if I found something like that from my children, from many years ago, I'd put it in my sock drawer and keep it.
Sure.
Yeah. Because I would think there's something very significant about this. And as it turns out, it has been, I mean, it has been the great creative driver, and the most, misplaced intentionality for life that you could ever have,
I'm sorry. What are you saying is the driver and the misplaced intention?
I mean, it's both that. It's a creative driver. In other words, it's like, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And yet, by placing all of that energy in that direction is just absolute futility.
Yeah.
And yet somehow in the shape of the world and the what the world values in terms of the ring of the cash register and the sound of applause, sometimes, people who are, badly damaged, end up succeeding by the world standards greatly, simply because of hypervigilance and the fact that my work here is not done until I've proven that you were wrong.
Yeah. I've wondered, what the NFL would look like if everybody felt comfortable in their own, in their self and their identity. And
yeah,
I know there's a way, I know there's a path to excellence a path to excellence that involves, mental health and
yes.
a strong sense of identity, but so much, it seems to me, so much success is driven by unhealth.
Yes. And this is why, for Andy, and for your listeners who maybe don't know or aren't remembering, Andy is my wife, and that's why I keep talking about her, and also a co-author with me in a book. But for her, this is why she refuses to talk about success, because she'll only talk about fruit, right? Because she doesn't want to get into a conversation about monetization or quantity, right? And so, I have had to live more in a world where I couldn't ignore that. If everyone that I report to uses quantity metrics, I mean, what do you do? You know, it's like selling 20,000 units is not good. Selling 500,000 is a start. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when that's their sense of reality, you have to decide, well, maybe I shouldn't be in this business, or I'm going to have to find a way to fit in here if only temporarily.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm going to learn this language as if I'm learning a foreign language in order to navigate, through this. But you don't have the luxury of talking to everyone about concepts like quality and fruit bearing,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are those people that, of course, in all kinds of businesses that have those values, but they may also, report to shareholders who are still going to be in the quantity business.
Yeah. Yeah. This is, you're leading to a topic that I was really interested in talking about. And that is, on the one hand, your, was it Molly said, your daughter Molly said, he's not famous, he's just well known.
Yeah, exactly.
On the one hand, you're well known as a person who knows how to make hits.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you're also known, certainly in Nashville, as a person who's committed to developing other people. Of course, being Andy's husband, you can hardly help but be hospitable and create spaces for people to flourish.
Right.
That's two different economies. And you as you said, your language of bilingualism, I think, is helpful here. You're
Yes.
speaking. I was
Yes,
thinking.
I am bilingual. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking in terms of living in two different economies, which, in Lewis Hyde's book, The Gift, he talks about there's
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what the regular economy is. There's some kind of economy and then the gift economy. And really we have to live in both.
Yeah. Well, just, I'm not sure how Lewis Hyde describes it, but just living under the banner of capitalism, where it's a system that requires wealth making in order to fund continued creativity is basically what it is. You can't continue to create. You can't just make enough to pay for what you've just made, because somebody has to step in and provide some extra, which is an easy way to think about what wealth is, not, Elon Musk wealth, but just for you and I, if we don't have any extra beyond what it takes to survive this day, and we want to open up a bookstore, we're either going to borrow money from people, right? Or we're going to have extra or wealth of some kind. And so knowing that, the sooner you learn that that's the system you're participating in, and then perhaps you tinker with the language as I just did, to have it make more sense to you, because you might really dislike the idea of I'm setting out to become wealthy, right?
Yeah.
You might set out to have more than you need in order that you can invest in others and show neighbor love and materialize your dreams. And so that's part of one of the reasons why you have to succeed by the world standards of success, right? Because they don't reward you for failing. Yet the economy, the grand and great economy that I live in, is that I live in an economy that failing may actually be exactly what you need to do.
Can you
And
say more
which
about
is
that?
completely upside down to the world's understanding of all the endeavors that we put our heart and mind to. Well, for example, failing at something, in the simplest way, is let's say I fail at something. I've had a big idea and I fail at it, right? And I can either decide in that moment that, this is just the beginning, and I have to, get back on the proverbial creative horse and ride into the sunset and try to, make this better. I just didn't get it right the first time. Or I can also say that, wow, I really missed that. I thought I was supposed to do that, but now that I've done it and it's failed, it's just affirming to me that I'm going in the wrong direction.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Right. So which is one of the reasons why for me as a person who's in the business of imagining and creating, is like failure is a huge part of what I do. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to say I love to fail, but I can't imagine having a sustainable career without factoring in failure.
Yeah. You know, I have in recent months sort of had a shift in something. I mean, a something about my view of the world. And I think some of it is maybe some sort of, lifting of a little cloud in my life, that for whatever reason now the idea of failing doesn't seem quite as alarming as it used to. And I'm a little more willing to try things that I might fail at. I'm really grateful. It's made a big difference in my outlook
I'm
on.
glad for that.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm glad for that. I mean, I think, not drawing the comparison too finely, but there's certainly, I think we are supposed to learn that there can be a story within a story of failure. And obviously the cross is the greatest example of that. And so we shouldn't fear failing as much as we do, because we don't know what good outcome will come through that experience. And the same goes for suffering. With the intractable headache that I have and other neurological symptoms that I go through every day, I want to be healed of it. But if I never am, I would never go back to the repetition of empire building. My weakness has changed me to be more the person that I have always aspired to be.
Wow.
And it's required suffering and weakness and having to say no to things, and to not, if I were to rewrite that letter to my parents, it would say, you can push me all you want, but at some point, I'm just one small, weak little person, and I'm going to go take a nap.
So it wasn't finally getting a number one single on the Billboard Top 100 that made you the man you wanted to be?
No, it wasn't. No. I talk about that in the book too, about, I had a friend who told me years ago, when I didn't used to have my plaques up, she told me, she says, put them up. Don't be an idiot. You're not taking them with you. and I thought, yeah, because I really do want, I think not only do I want them up, but I was afraid of needing them, even though clearly I did.
Yeah.
But I was afraid of, like, maybe publicly admitting that.
Yeah.
I wasn't mature enough. And so I had another circumstance where, this is after I was at my old studio, and was recording with some folks, and this person who was in the room, very famous person, and they said, you have all your awards up, sort of like a question, like, why do you do that?
Yeah.
And then I told him the story of my friend Maggie and what she had told me, and he said, I don't have any of mine up. And then it was just kind of quiet in the room, and then years, fast forward another 10 years, and then I'm over at Vince Gill's house and Peter Frampton's studio, and working on this film project, and they both had all their awards up.
Uh-huh.
And I just thought it just made me kind of like, after this 40-year period, just kind of take an assessment of this whole thing of like, what do these things mean to us, and how do they help shape our identity and how we move through the world and what we think of ourselves, and so on and so forth. And I kind of boiled it down to being a survivor.
Mm.
It's like, even if you were given 100 awards in your career, even if you just put one of them up, right?
Yeah.
It sort of says, you know what? I survived you. And by you, I mean the music business. I survived you. And not only that, I thrived. And not only that, I don't need your money anymore.
Mm. Wow.
So guess what? You don't get to interfere with my concepts of what constitutes good music.
Yeah. Wow. You didn't win any of those awards by yourself. Every one of those represents.
Gosh, they're all in community. Yeah.
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 And they're all a reminder of what you did with other people. I didn't attend my graduation when I finished my PhD.
Yeah.
And I really regret it.
Yeah.
For one thing, because I didn't actually do that by myself. If it was only me, then yes, I have the right to say whether I go or not, and whether I make a big deal of it or not. But there were lots of people who are involved in that process, and I didn't give them a chance to celebrate and be acknowledged for their part.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And
I thought it was some kind of humility, but it was actually kind of arrogance.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's so many things like in life like that, aren't there? That they just flip on their head at some point, and you're like, oh gosh, I got that so wrong.
Yeah.
I kind of feel that about this is, and one of the things that people have said about the memoir is like, gosh, there's so many. Like, I think it was Dan Allender the other day was saying, like, there's got to be like 2,000 names in this book. And I said, yeah, probably. Mm. And he asked me, well, is that intentional, or was it just part of the writing process? I said, well, it was very much, part of the writing process. But it was still this idea of like how I know what I know. And I can't be honest regarding that, and leave out the people, that were there to give me this pearl of wisdom, or to open this door of opportunity, or whatever it was. And so, or to be my nemesis for a time, or any number of things, So, I just felt like there was something about in the naming of the people, because well enough that what's an editor going to do immediately? It's like, people don't know these names. Let's start getting rid of some of them, right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, no, you don't understand. That's not the kind of book that we're doing.
I so love those passages in the epistles where Paul just lists names of people that I don't really know who they are, and he says, I commend. Now I'm not going to be able to recite their names, but I commend this person to this person, and tell this person to stop giving this other person a hard time, and
absolutely,
and that idea of him commending one person to another person is so beautiful, and it also I think it's relevant to the kind of life you've lived,
I wanted
bringing people together, introducing them, commending. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, thank you. Yes, that is definitely. It took me a while, I mean, I feel like I was a little bit of a late bloomer in terms of the development of my ego, and or maybe not the development of it, maybe the refining of it.
Yeah.
And to the point where I realize, oh, there's a lot more people in this story than me. And so maybe there's a little bit of overcompensation. But nevertheless, I mean, at 68, if I haven't got it by now, something's gone wrong. And so I definitely wanted the book to tell the story of the people and to be thankful for people, and to whether they ever know their name is in the book or not, I know that I recognize them and that I acknowledge that they played a role in me even getting to the point of having a career where I could even write a book,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's just no neutrality in any of it. And every person is valued. And I have really been intentional, at least over the last 10, 20 years of my life, to go back and find people and make sure they know that how I feel about them and how grateful I am for them. And I mean, I just mailed out two books yesterday to two very famous record producers that believed in me and worked with me. And I just wanted them, wrote in the front of the book, what they meant to me, and want to thank them for it, and they're included in the book. And I put little stickies, in the book so they could find out where I had mentioned them. But that's all a part of, to me, is just paying homage to those for which I would not have a story to tell.
Yeah. One of my favorite people in the book is, you don't give her name, but it's an old woman at one of your parents' funerals who said, "Chucky, you still making your tapes?"
Yes, I love that quote. We say that, Andy and I say that all the time.
Oh, it's so good.
It's so good.
And so necessary.
It's so necessary. So, I mean, it works on so many levels. I mean, it's the humbling level of, you go back to your hometown after, multiple international successes and you have an 80-year-old friend of your mother's ask if you're still making your tapes. And of course, there's no tape to be found, it's all ones and zeros, but yeah. So there's the beauty of that for sure. And also just, the beautiful thing of like, this is where I'm from. I'm from this kind of simplicity, and I did go out into a world, and adults recognized something in me, and they came around me, and incrementally I traveled through all these circles of affirmation, to get to this point where I could relay this story.
Yeah.
That was both humorous and profound.
Yeah. I mean, that's also a person who knew you a long time and who was interested, and I love it. Did Jeff Taylor? One of the times he was nominated for a Grammy. I don't know if he ever won a Grammy. This time he didn't. He just he was nominated, didn't win, and he said his mom sent him a clipping from the hometown newspaper that says, "Local boy loses Grammy."
I love that.
I may be misquoting that slightly, but that was the spirit. Okay, we need to wrap up here soon, but there's one thing I was interested in hearing you react to, and that's, one way of talking about fame is being loved by people that you can't love back, being known by people that you don't know and can't know, and even being just well known, and not famous. And then I also, so that's a situation you find yourself in. That you are known by people you can't know, and you're loved by people you can't love back. And yet I just know from your life that that you've been very committed to knowing and loving people who can know and love you back. And you've always, lived this sort of amphibious existence, or bilingual, or whatever we want to, living in two economies, whatever. Right. And I just want to know if you have any reaction to that, and is that shaking any ideas loose for you?
Yeah, I think that I learned through a number of different people over the years as I was aggregating a theology of the arts for myself, specifically music, was that what my calling is to be creator with us, or God's sort of musical person, right? Everywhere and in everything, in as much as creator with us directed me, right? So I had to be prepared, right? To me, that one of the very first things that I learned was about Bezalel. And so what did artistic preparedness look like? Well, it was skill and ability in what you might call the best in the world, right? And that to aspire to that did not have to be just an effort of the ego. It could be about giving your very best to the audience of one, and that quality could be all about stewardship. And then the second piece of it is equally important, and that is the spiritual component. So when Bezalel was chosen by God for this role in the building of the temple, it was about skill, ability, and the Spirit of God. And so for me, that's always been my foundation. And then making myself available to be God's musical person everywhere and in everything, in as much as God chooses for me to do that. So that everywhere and everything, that's multilingual then, right?
Yeah.
And so I do have my lanes that I have stronger skill and ability in. And so, for example, this is why what we know as contemporary Christian music or popular Christian music or worship music, it's a box too small for my calling.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm not in that box on occasion. And it doesn't mean that I'm not there in community with people and we're not making music in that. But I can never be just in that box because that's not my particular calling. That's just been the reason why I've been multilingual. And that has allowed me to, because I feel like my role is to always ask the question, what does it mean to love the church through music and to love the world through music? And so that I could be both a part of creating the songs that the church sings and the songs that the whole world sings.
Yeah. I was mentioning to Doug McKelvey that you and I were going to be talking, and he remarked that some of what you just talked about, and the idea of doing everything before the face of God, the Coram Deo, that you have been known to talk about quite a bit through the years. He mentioned that really had a big influence on his. It sort of became the seeds of Every Moment Holy.
Yeah, very much so. You can see that in there, and I think that's one of the things that people love about, and what makes it so unique is that it's like, oh, I didn't know we could pray about that.
Yeah, right. Well, I love that. I love learning that it was from his time. That book had its origins in some ways from his time at the Art House with you and Andy.
Yeah. Well, I loved, when we first met Doug and Nick Beret as well, and they were such a part of our early life here in Nashville, and I'm just I one of the great joys of my life, Jonathan, is seeing the people that God has allowed us to bump into, or be walking in life with, and to see how he has blessed and use the imaginations and creativity of these people in ways to help all of us make the world that we want to live in.
Yeah. Well, great. That sounds like a good place to stop. And thank you, and for that matter, Andy, for the work you've done in making this world look more like the world we all want to be in.
No, thank you, and likewise to you.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.